Jessica Lauren is having an argument with her mother in a squad car. She is about to enter the old police station for her first ever security shift, while her mother disapproves because of a past incident with her father. Hearing the mention of her father, Jessica abandons the conversation and leaves for her shift. As she walks through the blandly lit main corridor of the building, sounds of a struggle ensue. A shadowy figure enters the corridor, clearly angry and throwing a tantrum. Jessica approaches this figure, who shouts and startles her, forcing her to turn away. The man then moves towards her and they share introductions. Officer Cohen debriefs Jessica about her job throughout her shift. She has to protect an evidence room before a bio-waste team arrives to clean up at night. Delegation of duties aside, Cohen leaves and entrusts Jessica with the station for the night. Until the shift ends, Jessica is sitting at a desk, reading a book. Dozing off, the book falling on the floor wakes her up. A buzzing sound makes her move toward the corridor, where a malfunctioning light is buzzing and flickering. Suddenly, the phone for this old police station begins to ring. On the other end is a crying woman in distress who seems to be trying to reach someone for help. Jessica tries to follow up on the conversation to confirm the whereabouts of the woman, but the call disconnects. Realizing that this call should not have been made to her in the first place, she calls the authorities herself, informing them of this strange interaction. The respondent collects her complaint and moves on. Jessica looks around, hearing strange noises from across the corridors. Inspecting the cells in the kitchen, she begins to dine in the kitchen. The eerie corridors keep her on edge, but she decides to sit at a table and eat dinner anyway. She notices a large and thick strand of hair dislodged in her mouth. Disgusted, she gags and coughs it out. Collecting herself, a knock at the door brings her to the entrance. From the glass doors, she notices a homeless man standing still in the main lobby, not responding to any of her instructions. The man begins to pee himself, to which Officer Jessica moves toward him. The man, still unresponsive, doesn't even seem to notice Jessica until he randomly shouts and startles her. She firmly escorts him out of the main entrance. Jessica cleans herself up in the bathroom afterwards and notices something filthy on a shelf. Beginning to suspect that she is not alone in the station, she walks across the corridor toward the end of the hall. She finds a dimly lit hall leading into a ravaged bathroom. With spots and marking across all the ceramic, Jessica covers her nose to block out the disgusting stench. After examining the bathroom, she moves on to another room, this time a dimly lit locker room. She examines the different lockers until she finds locker 25, where a picture of a girl and her father are stuck behind a shelf. It is her father's locker, so she reaches for the photo and inspects it. She glances at the picture and smiles at it, considering whether to keep it. She decides against it and places the picture back. She closes the locker and moves away. As she does, it seems the lockers all across the room are now mysteriously open. Something spooky is definitely going on. Jessica moves back to her desk, where she receives another call from the same girl from earlier, Monica, still begging for help. The girl claims to be kept at a ranch, where she can hear the sounds of pigs, the only clue for Officer Jessica. The call cuts off again, and another caller takes her place. Waste removal are calling to inform her that they are unable to reach the station on time. That means she will have to spend even longer in the creepy station. Jessica is unperturbed, though, and moves on to calling the police station dispatcher again to give them about updates on this Monica girl. Oddly enough, it seems the girl is not calling 911, but the police station directly. Jessica goes back to reading the police handbook, barely reading it, but more focused on the phone perhaps ringing again. Suddenly, the shelves behind her begin to move. Jessica looks back, dismissing what she hears, but they move again, requiring her to inspect them. She returns to her seat, seeing that there is nothing wrong, only for the shelves to move again, more evidently this time. As she inspects them again, there is noise coming from the other end of the station. Jessica leaves her desk again to inspect the noise, finding clutter near a door and then hearing a similar noise from another room. As she moves towards the source of the sound, Jessica is now expressing her fear as she walks gingerly across the hall, equipping her firearm. She contacts the police department through the police radio, possibly asking for reinforcements. She hears only static until an eerie children's song plays from the other end. Suddenly the lights go out and red emergency lights begin flashing. She moves towards a room where she sees the same homeless man again, who seems to be looking through boxes to find something. Jessica turns the lights on and climbs onto the same scaffold as the homeless man, intending to subjugate him. The homeless man resists, but she neutralizes him and restrains him. She escorts him to a cell this time, but before she can leave, the door slams shut and seals them both inside. Suddenly, the lights switch off and the homeless man struggles, necessitating the use of a taser. She incapacitates the man and switches on a flashlight to get a better look at her surroundings. Assuming someone is outside, she begs to be let out. Peering out of the cell window, suddenly a person wearing a blood-covered hood appears, startling Jessica enough to make her drop the flashlight. Lights out, darkness fills the room, until the flashlight switches on and someone points it at Jessica. Jessica thinks it's the homeless man, threatening him with her gun if he does not return the flashlight. However, the person behind the light flashes it to another corner of the room, revealing the homeless man barely conscious. The person behind the mask starts murmuring, revealing her to be a woman. Jessica repeatedly asks for the person to identify themselves, but they keep murmuring to themselves until she makes her way to the door again. Finally, the person speaks to Jessica, threatening to hurt her. The light goes out one last time, and the hooded figure appears on her right, swiftly disappearing when the station lights come back on. Jessica leaves the cell and locks the homeless man inside. Breathing heavily, she recites the police code of conduct to calm herself down, and slowly gains composure. She makes her way back to the desk and decides to call Officer Cohen, but the call goes directly to voicemail. Still in shock, she is barely able to communicate what she is witnessing. However, she hesitates to mention her experience. Giving up on asking for help, she reclines back on her chair and sees letters scratched on the roof. Adding to her fear, Jessica is clearly becoming more and more paranoid. She goes through the different doors of the facility until she notices someone outside an exit door. She opens it, revealing a blonde woman casually smoking a cigarette. Jessica asks the woman to leave the premises, but lets her finish her cigarette. As she leaves, the woman decides to continue their conversation. The two talk about the payments, criminals who ended the lives of a group of girls. The story that people know about their capture is wrong. According to the woman, they were brought to the police station, where the payments collectively passed away at their own hands in their jail cell. To conclude her story, the woman also hums the tune to a song that the payments would sing, being the last sound to come from their cell. The tune is the same as the song that Jessica heard on her police radio before. The woman finally extinguishes her cigarette and makes her way off the station's premises. Walking back into the station, Jessica enters a room with an old CRT monitor. The monitor switches to a video of a man, John Mitchell Payman, apparently showing no remorse for being a murderer. The footage switches to other girls, clearly also psychotic criminals. The three talk about their religious views, gleefully complimenting the devil and the act of taking lives. Throughout the interrogations, the Paymans refuse to show remorse for their actions. They go into vivid details, explicitly showing their lack of concern for human life, treating life as a joke. The two girls seem to worship Mitchell Payman. Then the tape gets stuck, with a seeming threat specifically for Jessica. She takes in all that she is witnessing before her, greatly shaken by it. Suddenly, office chairs begin swerving around in the room, seeing glimpses of shadowy figures occupying the seats. Jessica finds herself on the floor, with the chairs now vacant and at a standstill. She hears the phone ring and rushes towards the desk again, where she receives another call from Monica. Monica claims she is part of a group of girls who have all perished. Still hysterical, she introduces herself further as 17-year-old Monica Young. Jessica keeps trying to find out more about Monica's situation, but the call ends with a shriek. Jessica calls the dispatcher again, mentioning further details about Monica. At the mention of the payments, the dispatcher begins to laugh, but realizes Jessica is serious about the situation. He collects himself and hears her out, after which he handles it as a proper report and moves on from the conversation. Jessica now hears whistling from across the hall. She finds the room with office chairs again. The door creaks at the end of the hall, catching Jessica's attention. She looks back into the room and finds the chairs oddly stacked up. This occurrence convinces her that the police station is playing a prank on her, possibly ragging her as the newbie cop on her first job. In her self-induced hysteria, she hears the door buzz, further making her believe that everything that has unfolded is just a prank, and that the officers behind it are about to reveal themselves. Jessica meets a male police officer at the door, who becomes her prime suspect for this sick prank. The cop seemingly does not understand the situation, but Jessica persists. The officer denies everything she says, and introduces himself as Officer Ryan Price. Jessica, with a sudden change in attitude, lets him in, and the two go back to her desk. The two officers share banter, mocking one another, and Officer Ryan reveals that he is only there to check up on her. However, he moves on to his real reason for appearing before her. He gets serious, opening up a discussion about Jessica's father. Ryan reveals the truth about Jessica's father, and a cop that fell victim to the Payman family. Her father passed at the hands of the murderous Paymans, who took the lives of 6 girls and 2 officers on a forsaken day. It concludes the story and eventually has to leave. Jessica protests and asks him to stay, but supposedly some work keeps him from doing so. He leaves the room, but vanishes from the station, leaving no evidence of his visit or his departure. Jessica inspects the corridors and entrance, until she hears different voices and noises approaching her and moving around the corridor. Suddenly, a hooded body is mysteriously dragged across the floor until the body floats on its own and starts moving erratically. Officer Jessica takes cover and prepares to confront the person again, but the body disappears. Across the station, the homeless man starts to cause a ruckus, crying and screaming. Jessica goes to inspect the man in his hysteria. He is clutched up against the door, until eventually moves away from the cell window to reveal 3 people from the ceiling. Convincing herself that what she is witnessing is delusion, she leaves the man in the cell and moves back to the corridor again. A crawling woman creeps behind her, but disappears when she checks her rear. She hears singing across the corridor, and finds herself in a room with a large mirror. Reaching the source of the singing, she notices a group of girls, seemingly normal from their reflection. But they turn their heads around to show that they are all wearing similar bloodied hoods to the mysterious body from before. The door behind Jessica suddenly closes, making her look back for a split second. She glances back at where the girls were sitting, only to find that they are no longer there. Jessica leaves the room and catches a glimpse of the evidence room which she was supposed to guard, now a complete mess. Becoming more and more hysterical, she decides to call the police again, asking that they relieve her from her shift because of her delusions. The respondent taunts her and makes her promise to leave the police force in exchange for leaving the station, to which she complies at the mention of her father. Jessica calls the cleaning crew again, asking for their whereabouts. Still a while away from reaching the station, she tells them that she will wait in her car outside, now getting ready to leave the building. She can't take the mysterious happenings anymore. As she leaves though, the phone starts ringing again, and Jessica's conscience forces her back into the dreadful station. On the other end of the call, Monica mentions that she has left the kidnapper's premises, seeing a sign revealing her location in the woods near a road. Monica is breaking down, expecting her inevitable doom, all while Jessica reaffirms that she will be fine. The call ends, and Jessica is clearly shaken. Jessica now talks to the dispatcher that she has been speaking with, and she learns that the girl she is talking to is the last victim of the payments, supposedly no longer alive. The dispatcher explains to her that the station was abandoned because of inexplicable occurrences. As he continues his story, Jessica notices a photo at the door, so she ends the call to inspect it. The photo is of her father lying in blood, clearly causing Jessica further distress. More pictures start randomly appearing, all evidence from the payment case. The last photo she notices is of Officer Price, who she now realizes is the other police victim of the payments. Suddenly, Jessica hears shrieking in her head, and the lights begin blaring. She hears the voices of the payments, and their final testimonies to the police. Suddenly, the pictures catch fire, and Jessica blacks out. Regaining consciousness, Jessica gets a call from her mother. She apologizes for the call from before, but Jessica dismisses the conversation as she notices someone across the hall. Chasing after this person, she lands headfirst into a police baton and passes out again. A woman drags her across the station and places her into a holding cell. The person in question is a woman, holding a gun against Jessica. Jessica thinks she is still in delusion, but the threat of a gunshot calms her down. The woman introduces herself as an associate of the payments, and starts rambling on about Michael. She explains that her presence at the station is for the celebration of the first anniversary of Mitchell Payment's passing, and the conversation ends with the woman shooting. The phone rings again, so a shaken Jessica retrieves her belongings and makes her way back to the desk. The phone is now shaking uncontrollably, but Jessica still responds. Monica is at the other end again, but starts laughing deliriously. Suddenly, objects on the desk begin to move, and a woman with a misshapen face appears before Jessica. Frightened, she backs against the wall, and the woman disappears. The woman is creeping around, and eventually approaches Jessica until she is right before her. Jessica slams her eyes shut in this situation, but when she opens them again, the woman is no longer there. Completely losing her mind at this point, she tries once again to leave the station. However, the door does not open, so she decides to shoot the glass, which also does not work. Her cell phone rings in the midst of all this, and her deceased father is on the other end. Breaking down, Jessica talks to him as if he is still alive, to which her father blackmails her into staying. Jessica apologizes for trying to leave, and decides to stay to deal with the supposed ghosts of the payments and avenge her father's passing. The call ends, and Jessica is still crying, when suddenly the homeless man walks across behind her. Realizing that nothing in the station makes sense, she approaches the man carefully, asking him to kneel. The man complies, and she restrains him until she looks back towards his head, now completely scarred and bloody. In her shock, the lights suddenly switch off. Jessica turns on her flashlight, and the man is now gone. She moves towards the holding cell where he was locked, finding his body from the roof. She inspects the room to find words written in blood across the wall, until the hooded person appears at the door and slams it shut. The hooded person disappears, and Jessica turns around to see a projection of the payments on a sheet of cloth. They use their own blood and smear it across pillowcases, making emblems across the pillowcases and then wearing them like hoods. Now it becomes clear. The hooded figures from before were the payments, haunting the police station. They then tie bed sheets around their necks and turn around. John Mitchell Payment unmasks himself afterward, to reveal his face, but with oddly demonic features. Frightened, Jessica leaves the cell. Outside, she sees Officer Price again, who taunts her and blows his. Jessica turns back to the holding cell, from where Michael Payment leaps at her, screaming. She runs away and finds a door with a picture of her and her father taped on it. Seeing the picture, she calms herself down again by reciting the police code of conduct. Afterward, her phone rings again, with her deceased father on the other end. He warns her that someone is coming for her, pushing her towards taking up arms and investigating the station once again. Jessica runs for the entrance, where she sees more hooded figures entering the station. She fires at them, but they get away and avoid getting shot. During this shootout, they taunt her with mentions of Michael Payment. Eventually, she shoots them all down, one by one, until she takes out the last one at one of the station exits. As she takes the last life, Cohen shoots her from behind. Jessica now notices that the last person she shot was one of the workers from the cleaning crew. Realizing that all of the waste crew tonight were victims of her delusion, Jessica enters denial. The clock reveals that it's the end of her shift, and as her life slowly ends, Sergeant Cohen calls dispatch. Meanwhile, Jessica sings the eerie songs of the payments, and in her last moments, she sees the Paymans before her as they bag her up to close the curtains.